Spencer, Indiana is a quiet town of roughly 22,000 people nestled about 40 miles southwest of Indianapolis in Owen County. It is the kind of place where neighbors know each other by name and families even feel safe enough to leave their front doors unlocked. Tamara Morgan would later describe this to reporters as simply the way things were. She said, "The front door was unlocked because we just don't ever lock the door. I've lived in Spencer all my life and, we just don't lock doors here." It was exactly that sense of security that made what happened in March 2016 so unthinkable. 15-month-old Shaylyn Ammerman was a toddler who was just learning to walk. She lived under a joint custody arrangement between her parents, Jessica Stewart and Justin Ammerman. At the time, Shaylyn was staying at her father Justin's home, where she lived alongside Justin, her paternal grandmother Tamara, and her uncle Adam. It was a modest household in a modest town, and there was no reason for anyone to believe that Shaylyn was anything but safe. The night of Tuesday, March 22nd, 2016 was by all accounts unremarkable. The Ammerman household had invited a guest over to hang out, and little Shaylyn had been put to bed in the living room where her crib was set up. The guest that Adam had invited over was 22-year-old Kyle Parker. The two had been friends for a while, and Kyle regularly came over to the house and was recognized as a trusted person by the household. That night, Parker brought alcohol with him. Tamara would later clarify to reporters that while some media outlets had characterized the evening as a party, that was not accurate. Adam and Parker spent the evening together in Adam's bedroom, drinking and watching a movie, while the rest of the household carried on separately. Tamara checked on the baby one more time before she herself went to bed, confirming around midnight that Shaylyn was still lying in her crib, sound asleep. Like always, the front door of the house was unlocked. Tamara also noted that the front door was heavy and difficult to open, and that it typically made a noticeable amount of noise when someone pulled it open. Under normal circumstances, someone opening that door in the middle of the night should have been heard, but on this night, either the noise was not loud enough to wake the sleeping family members, or it was simply absorbed into other ambient sounds occurring at the time. At some point after the rest of the family had gone to sleep, the evening took a dark turn. According to what prosecutors would later allege and what the probable cause affidavit detailed, Kyle Parker stayed up by himself after Adam went to bed, continuing to drink alone in the house. What happened next was pieced together through Adam's account to the police, Parker's own statements, and the confession Parker allegedly made to his stepfather. The full picture remains partially obscured by contradictions and gaps, but the broad strokes are as follows. Sometime between approximately 3 o'clock and 4 a.m. on the morning of Wednesday, March 23rd, Adam was jolted awake by the sound of the front door shutting. He looked out the window to see who was leaving. Outside, he saw Parker walking away from the house toward his car, but something was off. He was carrying something. Adam called out to Parker, yelling for him to say goodbye, but Parker would not turn around. He just kept walking. Adam would later tell detectives that as Parker moved away from the house, he thought he saw a small foot dangling from Parker's side, as though he was carrying a child against his body. But Adam was not certain. It was the middle of the night. He was tired. He had been drinking. And so, in a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life, Adam did not pursue the matter further. He didn't go outside or check on Shaylyn. He simply went back to bed. Tamara would later tell People magazine that Adam was devastated by this choice, that he blamed himself entirely for what happened, the guilt of having seen something that did not register as alarming enough in the moment, of having gone back to sleep instead of acting on the instinct that something was wrong, weighed on Adam heavily. According to the probable cause affidavit, after Parker left the Ammerman home with Shaylyn, he placed her in his vehicle. She was alive and still dressed in her owl print sleeper. Parker began driving toward Hoover Street in Gosport, a small town located roughly 9 miles from the Ammerman residence. The first person in the household to realize something was wrong was Shaylyn's father, Justin. He woke up at approximately 8 a.m. and walked into the living room to check on his daughter. He found that the crib was empty. Not only was the child missing, but her blanket was as well. Nothing else in the living room had been disturbed. A brand new laptop sitting out in the open was untouched. Cell phones were in place, and nothing of material value appeared to be missing. Justin frantically ran to wake his mother, Tamara. He asked if she had Shaylyn, to which Tamara said she did not. In that moment, the household went into chaos. The family searched the house, calling out for Shaylyn. Initially, the family was confident that the girl was still in the house, as Shaylyn was barely capable of getting around on her own, and thus had no means by which she could exit the home. But eventually, with no sign of the girl, the police were called. Officers arrived and quickly assessed the scene. Within hours, what had begun as a local missing child report escalated into a multi-agency operation of a scale that the town of Spencer had never seen. The Indiana State Police led the investigation and organized multiple active search parties across the surrounding area. Meanwhile, Shaylyn's mother, Jessica Stewart, had police pounding on her front door, informing her that her daughter had gone missing. When asked whether anyone had been at the house the night before, Justin mentioned Kyle Parker. He did so very casually, without suspicion. To Justin, this wasn't a light bulb moment. When the reporter pressed for more information about Parker, Justin said he didn't know much. Tamra, when asked whether she thought Parker could be behind the disappearance, said he had already been investigated and that as far as she had heard, Parker had no idea where Shaylyn was. She also mentioned a woman named Kelly Rogers who had apparently been in the house at some point during the early morning hours between 2 and 7:30 a.m. Tamra did not seem to consider Kelly a suspect either. Despite several adults stating that Parker probably wasn't involved, officials still decided to question him. He was brought in for his first formal interview with investigators on the same day that Shaylyn was reported missing. During this initial questioning, Parker denied any involvement in the disappearance. He told police that he was not carrying anything when he left the Ammerman home and that he did turn around and wave goodbye to Adam when Adam called out to him. This directly contradicted Adam's account, in which Adam said Parker would not turn around and appeared to be holding something against his body. Parker maintained this denial through the entirety of the first interview. He offered no explanation for what had happened to Shaylyn and provided no leads. Ultimately, the interview ended without a breakthrough. However, police were not quite done with investigating Parker. After the first interview failed to produce results, investigators contacted his stepfather, Mike Patton. They told Patton that they believed Parker was involved in Shaylyn's disappearance, but that he was refusing to cooperate with the investigation. Patton told officers that he would speak with him about, quote, doing the right thing. The plan paid off, though what it produced was less a clean confession and more a series of fragmented, damning admissions that would define the rest of the case. On March 24th, Parker was brought back in for a second interview with police. At some point during this interview, he was given a smoke break. It was during this break outside the confines of the interrogation room that Parker reportedly spoke to his stepfather. According to Patton's account to investigators, the conversation was brief and damaging. Parker told Patton that, quote, the police would have the truth once they found Shaylyn's body and the DNA with it. Patton said he understood immediately what Parker was telling him. The probable cause affidavit said the following. Mike stated he knew right then that Kyle had taken Shaylyn and killed her. Patton also told investigators that Parker disclosed additional details during their conversation. Parker allegedly said that after he killed Shaylyn, he drove her body to the location where it was ultimately found. When Parker realized what he had done, he told his stepfather that he tried to clean it up. Parker also told his stepfather that DNA evidence would point police to him, and he claimed he had used bleach to try to eliminate traces of assault. Following this conversation, Parker agreed to cooperate with investigators, at least partially. He consented to show police on a map where Shaylyn's body could be found. Notably, even while providing this information, Parker attempted to control the narrative. He told investigators that they shouldn't find any of his DNA on Shaylyn's body, a statement that appeared designed to preemptively distance himself from the assault evidence. It was a peculiar thing to say for someone who claimed not to be involved, and it would later be undercut by the fact that investigators actually did not find Parker's DNA at the scene, though for reasons that had nothing to do with bleach. By Thursday afternoon, March 24th, investigators were directed to a remote rural area near Gosport, specifically near the White River on private property. It was emphasized that the site was not easy to see or reach casually, describing it as being near where the river would flood. According to Indiana State Police, the body of a female infant matching Shaylyn's description was found just after 6 p.m. that evening. Police statements made it clear that although the discovery was a major development, they did not want the public to assume the case was solved simply because a body had been found. Police remained at the location into the evening, processing the area and collecting evidence. Media coverage emphasized that investigators were still trying to piece together what happened when Parker left the house. After being confronted with the discovery, Kyle Parker had no choice but to come clean as to how the situation had developed to this point. In his words, Parker stated that after driving off with Shaylyn, he pulled over at some point and assaulted the victim in the front seat of his vehicle while she was still alive. Dr. Donna Stewart, who conducted the autopsy, told investigators that this was the worst case of deviant trauma she had seen in her entire career. The injuries to Shaylyn's nose and mouth were consistent with the offender placing his hand over her face to smother her, likely to prevent her screams from being heard. Additionally, the injuries to her throat were consistent with strangulation. After the assault, Parker killed Shaylyn by smothering her with a cloth that he already had in the vehicle. The cause of death was officially ruled asphyxiation. After the killing, he drove to the remote wooded area where Shaylyn's remains were later discovered. Her body was placed next to a tree in the brush at the edge of a farm field. He then attempted to destroy evidence. According to the affidavit, Parker poured bleach on the body and on himself in an effort to eliminate DNA evidence. He then burned all of Shaylyn's clothing along with her pacifier. Investigators wrote that Parker, quote, thought he would create reasonable doubt by using the bleach to destroy DNA and to confuse the investigators by accusing a family member, because one of them had a history of similar assaults. Parker had not only committed the crime, but he had also formulated a plan about how to get away with it. Parker then returned home and went about his morning as though nothing had happened. All of this occurred before 8 a.m. when Shaylyn's family eventually woke up. On March 28, 2016, Owen County prosecutor Don Vandermoor filed a sweeping set of charges against Kyle Parker. Parker appeared for his initial hearing via video link from the Owen County Jail, where a judge entered a not guilty plea on his behalf and ordered him held without bond. Attorney Jacob Fish was appointed as his public defender. The community of Spencer reacted with grief and anger. Several hundred people gathered at a local park for a prayer vigil on March 25th. Shaylyn's funeral was held on March 30th at the Christian Life Center in Spencer, with a private burial following at Chambersville Cemetery. Many residents openly called for Parker to face the death penalty or life without parole. Parker's family, meanwhile, found themselves caught in the crossfire. His mother, Christina, released a brief statement saying, "Our hearts are heavy and filled with grief over this beautiful little girl's passing. It is a difficult time for all families involved." His sister, Bree Smith, expressed shock and disbelief and said, "It is awful. My heart is broken. I pray to God my brother didn't do it. I love my brother. I'm in shock, and I just can't believe any of these charges." Shaylyn's grandmother, Tamra, had no sympathy. What haunted her was not just the act itself, but the coldness Parker displayed in the hours afterward, the way he sat through police questioning without flinching. As the months passed and the case moved toward trial, prosecutor Vandermoor came face to face with a devastating reality. Despite the apparent confession and the horrific autopsy findings, the evidence needed to guarantee a conviction was falling apart. The most significant problem was the complete absence of DNA evidence linking Kyle Parker to the crime. Of all the forensic evidence collected from the remains and the crime scene, not a single sample matched Parker's DNA. He had reportedly told his stepfather that DNA evidence would point police to him and had claimed that he used bleach to cover his traces after the assault. But investigators found no bleach on Shaylyn's body or her clothing. Even more troubling, the only conclusive forensic evidence that was recovered pointed not to Parker, but to a third party entirely. Parker's own statements to police compounded the problem. Over the course of the investigation, he gave multiple conflicting accounts of what happened the night of the kidnapping. At various points, he even implicated other people in Shaylyn's death. While the alleged confession to his stepfather was powerful, the inconsistencies across interviews gave a defense attorney significant material to work with in undermining the prosecution's narrative. Perhaps the most crippling blow to the prosecution came from its own witnesses. Vandermoor revealed during later court proceedings that several key witnesses had a large number of impeachable offenses on their records. These were not minor credibility issues. They were the kind of problems that could unravel an entire case in front of a jury. But the situation grew even worse. During a forensic sweep of electronic devices that multiple witnesses had access to, investigators discovered deeply disturbing and violent search histories focused on adult content. During the eventual plea hearing, Vandermoor shared some of these search terms aloud to the court. They included searches related to women being bound, gagged, and killed, as well as terms such as girls eaten alive, girls hanged, and girls snuff. These searches were not associated with Kyle Parker, but were found on devices used by the prosecution's own witnesses. Vandermoor drove the significance of this discovery home during the hearing, asking the Indiana State Police trooper on the stand to confirm that multiple people had access to these devices during the time frame of the investigation. The implication was that a defense attorney could have stood before a jury and constructed a plausible argument that someone other than Parker, perhaps one of these witnesses with violent search histories and criminal records, was the true perpetrator. Court documents also revealed that Parker's own friends had told police he was drawn to sadistic adult material and was attracted to underage girls in the 12 to 14 range. Parker denied these claims. But even this evidence was muddied by the similar material found on the witnesses' devices. To make matters worse, of the 3 individuals given polygraph examinations during the investigation, 2 failed. While polygraph results are generally inadmissible in court, the failures further eroded the prosecution's confidence in bringing the case before a jury. Faced with this cascade of evidentiary problems, Vandermoor made the agonizing decision to offer Kyle Parker a plea deal. On February 3rd, 2017, Parker pleaded guilty to only 2 charges: murder and kidnapping. In exchange, the prosecution dropped the remaining 4+ charges. The agreement called for a 60-year prison sentence for the murder charge and 16 years for kidnapping, to be served concurrently. One of the most controversial elements of the deal was that Parker would only be required to register as a violent offender if he were ever released, not as a offender. Given that the medical examiner had conclusively documented severe deviant assault, this provision ignited public outrage. Social media erupted with criticism of Vandermoor, and many in the community felt that justice had been stolen from Shaylyn for a second time. Vandermoor believed the alternative of taking the case to trial and risking a full acquittal was a far worse outcome. The sentencing hearing lasted only 45 minutes. It took place in the Owen County Circuit Court before Judge Lori Thatcher Quillen, and it was the last time the public would hear directly from the people whose lives Parker had destroyed. Shaylyn's mother, Jessica, addressed Parker directly. She spoke of the future her daughter would never have and the family that would never be whole again, saying, "You took my loving, sweet, and beautiful daughter away from me, her brother, her dad, and everyone who loves her. I hope you live with your guilt, and it torments you for the rest of your life." In a longer written statement submitted to the court, Jessica described how Shaylyn's 2 older brothers now lived in fear that someone might come and take them too. Justin told the court that Shaylyn was his only child and the light of his life. He admitted that when he first learned what had happened, he wanted to find the person responsible and kill them, and that when he heard the full extent of what had been done to his daughter, he wanted to die himself. He said the following to Parker: "Why did you do this to my baby girl? Please, Kyle, change your plea and admit that you hurt her and left her out in the cold and the bad weather." Judge Quillen accepted the plea agreement and sentenced Kyle Parker to 60 years in the Indiana Department of Correction. She said, "The facts of this case were the most gut-wrenching I have ever heard. Your actions were pure evil that evening. Many in this community rightfully wanted you to receive the death penalty or life without parole for this crime. What I can legally do as a judge versus what I would like as a parent and member of this community are totally in conflict. It's clear to me, based upon the gruesome facts of this case, that you, Mr. Parker, have no moral compass and no decency." Parker did not speak during the hearing. His mother, Christina, asked only that the vandalism to her home and threats against her family stop, saying, "All along, we've wanted nothing more than fair justice for everyone involved." Under Indiana law, Parker must serve at least 75% of his 60-year sentence because he was convicted of murder. With credit for good behavior, his earliest possible release would come after approximately 45 years, making him roughly 68 years old. Mackenzie Lueck was born on March 8, 1996, and grew up in El Segundo, a small coastal city in California. She was the only daughter in a family of 4 children. Her family was active in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and she attended El Segundo High School, where she competed on the school's swimming team and also played water polo. Those who knew her during this period described her as someone who was social and energetic. Mackenzie was close with her family, particularly her grandmother. In June 2019, she had flown home to the Los Angeles area from Salt Lake City to attend her grandmother's funeral on the weekend of the 15th and 16th. After graduating from high school, Mackenzie enrolled at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. She had been a student there since 2014, making her a part-time senior by the spring of 2019. Beyond the classroom, she worked at a biological testing company and spoke regularly with academic advisors about her post-graduation plans. She was actively exploring the possibility of attending nursing or medical school after completing her undergraduate degree. She was on track to graduate in May 2020. One of the defining aspects of Mackenzie's college experience was her involvement with the Alpha Chi Omega sorority. Within the sorority, Mackenzie was paired with a mentorship system common in Greek organizations, where an older member, referred to as a big, guides a newer one. Her big was Carly Riley, who told reporters that she had been drawn to Mackenzie's energy from the very first time they met during a sorority event. In 2018 and 19, Mackenzie was active on multiple dating platforms. She maintained profiles on apps like Tinder, but she was also a user of a website called Seeking Arrangement under the username BeachBaby96. Seeking Arrangement, now rebranded as Seeking, is a dating platform that markets itself as a place for so-called sugar daddies to connect with sugar babies. Mackenzie was not simply a casual user of the site, but even identified herself as a sugar baby and had at least 2 active arrangements at the time. She was also involved in online communities and groups, including a podcast called Call Her Daddy. She had been offering advice to other women who were interested in entering the sugar baby lifestyle. This dimension of her life was largely unknown to her family. Her father later discovered she had been using a credit card he did not know she possessed, as well as a separate bank account he was unaware of. He also found that she had been using a third-party messaging application called Text Me on her phone, which provides a secondary phone number. It was through this app that Mackenzie had been in contact with various people she met through dating platforms. The sugar dating world carries inherent risks, particularly for young women meeting strangers they have only interacted with online. Many of the private settings where meetups are conducted come with significant power imbalances. As mentioned, in the summer of 2019, Mackenzie flew home to El Segundo to attend her grandmother's funeral. On Sunday evening, June 16th, Mackenzie boarded a flight back to Utah. Her plane touched down at Salt Lake City International Airport at approximately 1:35 a.m. on Monday, June 17th. After landing, she texted her mother to confirm her safe arrival. She collected her luggage and ordered a ride from Lyft at around 2:40 a.m. Rather than heading home, she directed the driver to take her to Hatch Park, arriving at approximately 3 a.m. She told the driver she was meeting a friend. Mackenzie had arranged a meeting with a man named Ayula Ajayi, whom she had connected with on the Seeking Arrangement site in 2018. Cell phone records showed multiple text exchanges between them in the early morning hours of June 17th, with her final message to Ayula sent at 2:58 a.m. Cell tower data placed both of their phones at Hatch Park within 1 minute of each other at 2:59. At that same moment, Mackenzie's phone was powered off. At the time, she was 23 years old and 11 months from graduation. She had just buried her grandmother and was heading into the last stretch of her college career. What happened next would change everything. Ayula was born on April 22, 1988, in Nigeria. Details about his childhood and upbringing are scarce, but his own self-authored biography described him as someone who, quote, has survived a tyrannical dictatorship and escaped a real-life crime. What amount of his accounts are true is unclear. What is known is that he traveled to the United States in the fall of 2009 on a student visa, arriving in the state of Utah to enroll at Utah State University in Logan. Shortly after arriving on campus in October 2009, Ayula was baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. An Ogden missionary named Logan Dill, who met him on the Utah State campus, helped facilitate his conversion. Dill recalled that Ayula appeared very interested in the faith and that things moved quickly. Dill knew him by the nickname Joy and described him as a happy, humorous person who made an effort to make those around him feel comfortable. It was an impression that would prove tragically at odds with the reality of who the man actually was. His academic career at Utah State University was marked by instability, deception, and repeated failure. A spokesperson for the university confirmed that he attended the school during 3 separate time frames: the fall semester of 2009, the fall 2010 through spring 2011 period, and finally from spring 2015 through fall 2016. Despite these 3 attempts spanning 7 years, he never earned a degree. University officials were not even certain whether he had formally declared a major at any point during his enrollment. After leaving the university following the spring 2011 semester, he did not simply move on. By 2012, campus police had multiple run-ins with him that painted a deeply troubling picture. Officers first encountered him sleeping on a couch inside a campus building. When questioned, Ayula gave conflicting and nonsensical statements about his housing situation, his future plans, and his immigration status. Police came to suspect that he was effectively homeless and had been using the university's facilities despite no longer being enrolled as a student. The situation escalated when Ayula was found in possession of an iPad that had been stolen from a professor's classroom. When confronted, he claimed that his mother had sent the device to him and that he did not even know how to use it. Campus police were not convinced. He was arrested on suspicion of possession of stolen property, though formal charges in that particular case do not appear to have been filed in public records. Investigators also discovered during this period that his student visa had expired, meaning he was in the United States illegally. On August 2, 2012, Utah State University officials sent Ayula a formal letter banning him from campus. The letter said the following: "It has come to my attention that you are currently out of status with the United States of America Immigration Services and are in the US illegally. Due to your current status and also because of the recent charges filed by police, your status has become more complicated." The letter specified that Ayula had no legitimate reason to be on campus and that if he returned for any reason, he would be required to call ahead and be escorted by police during his visit. Campus police records also noted that if Ayula were to be arrested on campus again, US Immigration and Customs Enforcement should be notified. Something else that was off-putting in hindsight was that he appeared to be using the university environment to search for a wife, potentially as a strategy to avoid deportation. He was already married to a woman in Dallas at the time, though officials did not seem to have been aware of this. Despite being banned in 2012, Ayula managed to re-enroll at Utah State in the spring of 2015. A university spokesman explained that by the time he returned, his legal status had changed and he met the requirements for admission. He attended through the fall of 2016 before leaving for a final time. Elaborating on the previously mentioned marriage, which occurred in June 2011, between his first and second stints at Utah State, Ayula married a woman named Tanisha Jenkins in Dallas, Texas. Jenkins, a mother of 4, said she was introduced to Ayula by her godmother. Jenkins explicitly asked her godmother if the man was crazy or a killer, to which the godmother responded, "He's a good person." At first, Jenkins said that he was cool and loving, and he took care of her 4 children. But once her baby was born, things changed rapidly. He told Jenkins he wanted to move from Dallas back to Salt Lake City. When she refused, citing the fact that she had children and could not simply uproot her life, Ayula became angry and controlling. She said, "He was telling me not to talk to anybody. He used to check up on me. He started to get more and more aggressive. Eventually, he said he would kill me if I didn't go to Utah." Jenkins said the two never consummated the marriage because she was too afraid of him. The final encounter between the couple took place at a friend's house in Dallas. According to Jenkins, Ayoola attacked her and tried to tie her up with a phone cord. She attempted to flee, but he blocked the door, which led to Jenkins leaping through a window to escape. However, the fight did not end there. Ayoola grabbed a kitchen knife and slashed Jenkins's hand. Jenkins did not report the incident to the police. Instead, she moved out of her apartment and effectively went into hiding. Even after she stopped seeing him, Jenkins said a friend of his from the army kept calling her and making threats. Additionally, she told interviewers that the man had a drinking problem during their marriage and became violent when he was under the influence. She asked for a divorce repeatedly, but he refused to sign the papers. Court records show that Ayoola himself ultimately filed for divorce in January 2019, just 5 months before he encountered Mackenzie. Despite his chaotic personal and academic life, Ayoola managed to maintain a respectable professional facade. His LinkedIn profile indicated work experience in information technology and tech support at several notable companies, including Dell, Goldman Sachs, and Microsoft. He held the title of Senior Technical Support Analyst at Dell. At some point, he also listed himself as a systems administrator at Goldman Sachs on Facebook and claimed to have been an information technology specialist for the US Army on LinkedIn. He also pursued a modeling career through Model Management, an online platform. On his modeling profile, he described himself as tall, buff, funny, romantic, violent, and a victim. He also self-published a novel on Amazon in 2018 titled Forge Identity. The book told the story of a teenage boy named Ezekiel who witnesses a gruesome murder. The story followed Ezekiel as he grappled with whether to pursue a life of crime or forge a new path. The novel's plot, centered on a murder victim who is burned alive, took on a deeply disturbing significance that will become obvious later on. Two other notable details involve a 2014 investigation in North Logan, Utah, and an assault in March of 2018. The 2014 incident stated that Ayoola was investigated as a suspect, but the woman who filed the complaint ultimately chose not to pursue criminal charges. As a result, no arrest was made and the case was effectively closed. This was the first documented instance of a violence allegation against Ayoola. The 2018 incident occurred when Ayoola invited a woman he had met through a dating site to his home. The woman agreed to come over and the two were watching TV together when he began to forcefully and inappropriately touch her. When she resisted and attempted to pull away, he overpowered her, pinning her down and biting her at least 3 times. The assault left significant bruising and visible bite marks on the woman's body. The victim did not initially report the assault to law enforcement. It was not until more than a year later, after hearing about the encounter with Mackenzie, that the woman recognized him and contacted the police. Her account led to additional criminal charges against Ayoola. In April 2019, just 2 months before meeting Mackenzie, he contacted a local contractor and asked him to build a secret, soundproofed room beneath the front porch of his home. The specifications he provided were alarming. The room was to have hooks installed on the walls at head height, and the entry point was to be secured with a fingerprint scanner. When the contractor asked what the room would be used for, Ayoola claimed he wanted a place to hide alcohol from his Mormon girlfriend. The contractor found the request deeply unsettling and refused the job. Separately, a house cleaner who had worked at his home noted that he had an unusual number of cameras installed throughout the residence, with a particular concentration in the master bedroom. Back to the meeting between Mackenzie and Ayoola, it was later stated by Ayoola himself that he had anticipated killing Mackenzie long before the two agreed on meeting. Before the event, he had disabled the cameras in his home and stocked up on supplies including zip ties, rope, belts, sharp instruments, and cleaning chemicals. When police searched the house later, they found multiple cutting tools, bleach-stained clothing, and cut bone fragments in an upstairs bathroom trash can. Cell data shows that Ayoola's phone was back at his residence by approximately 3:07 a.m. Given the approximately 10-minute drive between the park and his house, investigators concluded that Mackenzie was brought straight from Hatch Park into his home with no stops in between. Downstairs, a guest from Texas was asleep in the basement Airbnb apartment. Upstairs, Mackenzie unknowingly set foot into the home of her killer. Once inside, Mackenzie was restrained almost immediately. Ayoola bound her wrists behind her back using zip ties and rope. With her hands secured, Ayoola began choking her with his hands. At some point during the attack, Mackenzie screamed out for him to stop. Instead, he escalated by flipping Mackenzie onto her stomach and looping a belt around her neck. When Mackenzie's remains were later recovered and examined, the medical examiner documented extensive blunt force trauma to the left side of her head. There was a hole in her skull approximately 5 centimeters in diameter, and part of her scalp from that region was missing. The damage to the skull had caused a hemorrhaging inside the brain, and the medical examiner ultimately determined that this brain hemorrhage, a direct result of the blunt force impact, was the cause of death. One of the most chilling aspects of the case is the knowledge that as all of this was happening, there were other people physically on the property, unaware of what was unfolding nearby. The guest later told detectives he woke up that morning to find Ayoola already awake, sitting on a trash can in front of the garage and acting unusually wired, telling the guest he had been awake all night and was running on no sleep. Once Mackenzie was dead, Ayoola immediately removed her body from the house. He placed her in the yard behind his detached garage and buried her in a shallow pit along with some of her belongings. Instead of burying all of her personal items, Ayoola took some of them to the Jordan River and deliberately scattered them along the bank. In that stretch of river, police later recovered her student ID, partially burned clothing, and more. The clearest view into Ayoola's behavior in the hours immediately after the murder comes from the Airbnb guest. He claimed that Ayoola asked if he knew how to siphon gas from a car. He found the question strange, but attempted to help anyway. When they couldn't get the gas out of the vehicle, Ayoola shifted to a different plan. He said he needed to buy a gas can so he could burn wooden pallets stacked in the driveway. The guest recalled that he had not noticed any pallets when he first arrived days earlier, which raised the possibility that Ayoola had staged the pallets as a convenient excuse for an open fire. Security footage from a nearby Smith's grocery store later captured him purchasing a red plastic gas can at approximately 9 a.m. on June 17th. The guest accompanied him to fill it with gasoline. When they returned to the house, the guest went to take a shower. By the time he was done and came back outside, a fire was already burning in the backyard behind the garage. Over the course of June 17th and 18th, Ayoola repeatedly poured gasoline onto the fire of the pallets, which neighbors later described as unusually hot and producing a smell unlike anything they were familiar with. Another neighbor became so concerned about the fire that she confronted Ayoola and threatened to call the fire department if he didn't put it out. Ultimately, the fire did go out, but only after substantial burning had taken place. For several days after, he attempted to live as if nothing had happened. The burn pit in his yard had cooled, the shallow grave in his backyard was concealed, and Mackenzie's belongings were now split between his property, the river, and his car. He continued renting out the basement as an Airbnb and maintained an outwardly normal routine while Mackenzie's friends and family expressed concern and filed a missing person report after she failed to return calls and messages. Ayoola's situation changed once detectives began contacting people who had communicated with Mackenzie around the time she disappeared. Phone records quickly showed that one of her last contacts was with Ayoola. Investigators traced messages sent through a third-party texting app back to his devices and linked his number and online profiles to Mackenzie. They subsequently went to his home and asked him to come in for an interview. During that interview, Ayoola lied repeatedly. He claimed he had never met Mackenzie in person, said he did not recognize her when shown a photograph, and insisted he had been with an ex-girlfriend on the night she disappeared. Detectives confronted him with phone and carrier records showing their messaging and the fact that both phones had pinged at Hatch Park at the same time, but he stuck to his story and said he would never lie to the police. Realizing that police were now focused on him and might soon search his property, Ayoola decided to move Mackenzie's remains off-site. Around June 25th, he dug up the charred remains from the backyard burial site, loaded them into his vehicle, and drove north toward Logan Canyon, roughly 80 to 90 miles from Salt Lake City. Cell tower data later placed his phone in the canyon that afternoon for about 2 hours. In Logan Canyon, he chose a wooded area off the main road, dug a shallow grave, and reburied what remained of Mackenzie. Then he drove back to Salt Lake City, apparently believing he had distanced himself from the most incriminating physical evidence. Meanwhile, detectives were building a case for a search warrant based on the phone records and Ayula's interview inconsistencies. Once a judge approved the warrant, officers returned to Ayula's home with a full search team and cadaver dog. The dog was taken into the backyard and almost immediately alerted to a disturbed patch of soil near the garage. Excavation of that area uncovered charred muscular tissue, a partial scalp with hair attached, a rib bone, small skull fragments, and burned debris. Inside the house, the search team found more evidence of a rushed cleanup. There were large amounts of cleaning products and air fresheners distributed throughout the home. In the laundry area, officers found sweatpants and a hoodie stained with bleach, as well as shoes and socks with what appeared to be bloodstains near the washing machine. In an upstairs bathroom trash can, they discovered small cut bone fragments mixed in with other items, alongside razor blades and cutting tools, suggesting that parts of the remains had been cut or trimmed during the disposal process. Investigators also seized knives, scissors, and a stun gun from the residence. The Kia Optima parked outside contained the same red gas can Ayula had been recorded buying at Smith's, and the interior smelled strongly of gasoline. With all this evidence in hand, a SWAT team arrested Ayula on June 28, 2019, and he was charged with aggravated murder and related offenses. After his arrest, he told his attorneys where he had reburied Mackenzie in Logan Canyon. Working with prosecutors, they directed investigators to the site. On July 3rd, search teams uncovered a shallow grave in the canyon containing a charred body with the arm still bound behind the back with zip ties and rope, matching the bindings described in Ayula's account of the attack. On July 5th, the medical examiner confirmed the remains were Mackenzie's. Ayula's trial was originally scheduled for March 12, 2020, but was postponed to allow prosecutors additional time to process the extensive body of evidence and provide it to the defense. A 3-day preliminary hearing was later set for October 28, 2020. On October 7, 2020, before the preliminary hearing could take place, Ayula entered into a plea agreement. He pleaded guilty to first-degree aggravated murder and third-degree desecration of a human body in connection with Mackenzie's killing. In exchange, prosecutors dropped the charges of aggravated kidnapping and obstruction of justice and took the death penalty off the table. Ayula also pleaded guilty to 1 count of second-degree forcible abuse in connection with the separate March 2018 assault case. On October 23, 2020, Judge Vernice Treese sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the aggravated murder conviction. He received an additional 5 years for the desecration of a human body charge and 1 to 15 years for the forcible abuse conviction. During the sentencing hearing, Ayula said the following: "I'm sorry for what I did. I know this won't bring her back." In court, Mackenzie's father said, "My daughter was a sweet, amazing young lady with the world ahead of her. She was a kind-hearted person who cared about others. Now I will not have the opportunity to see her blossom in life." Mackenzie's cousin also addressed the court saying, "This is a nightmare you can't wake up from. I will never be able to forgive what happened to her. I will never forgive the monster who took her life. Never in my life have I felt anger the way I have the last 16 months. Never have I been so fearful for my life because I know how real evil is in this world." Investigators concluded that Ayula did not kill Mackenzie out of anger or to seek some sort of potential gain, but rather he simply wanted to know what it was like to take someone's life. Today, Ayula is serving his life sentence without the possibility of parole.